All right, congratulations, Anna. So Jett McCandless is the second Jett I've met. A very close friend of mine, just south of here, we have what's called the Pacific Air Show, which has become the #1 air show in the world. We have the Blue Angels, the Thunderbirds, everybody, 1 million people on the beaches of Huntington Beach, 3 days in a row. But anyway, my buddy Kevin Elliott owns and runs that air show. And he and his wife have been trying to have kids forever and ever and ever, went through everything. Finally, they had a son last year. And of course, he named his son Jett. So, second Jett I've ever met. So now we're going to have a fireside chat with Jett, the founder and CEO of Project 44, and our very own Nick Baez.
Thank you. There are certainly be more of them. Hello.
Hey. Well, Jeff, a long time no see.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, first of all, for winning the Digital Transformation Award. So now I think what I really want to get into is sort of a depth of my earlier conversation in my presentation about the digital transformation. So it's a one thing that gets thrown around that the companies need to adopt the transformation.
That's right.
The company needs to be a little bit more digital. But let's talk about what is the digital transformation in the lenses of Project 44, and what was the vision which started Project 44?
Yeah. Well, one, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's just feel incredibly fortunate and blessed to be here. You know, I've been in logistics since 1999. I started in Portland, Oregon, so not too far, just up the I-5 corridor. And my very first day at the company was Roadway Express, an LTL trucking company. And it was to answer the phone and tell Nike and Columbia Sportswear and Bowflex what the ETA was for their truck. And the answer is always very easy because it's 15 minutes. And I was going to university at the time, and I looked over at my boss. I said, "Hey, like, isn't there a way that we can get a better ETA?" And he says, "Shut up, kid. Keep answering the phone and tell everyone it's 15 minutes." But I always took that with me on this journey, and eventually I won't bore you with all the story, but I had this career path where I got to see all the different nodes, whether it's from a shipper, a BCO, a LSP, or a carrier. And what you could see is that there was a lack of connective tissue. And when you go to the other adjacent industries, whether it's fintech or finance or communication or payment or travel, you could see that there was this connective tissue. And if you could build, and it didn't exist in supply chain, it didn't exist in logistics. What little amount of digitalization that was there was something called EDI. And I always say you can't spell die without EDI. Because it's just this painful, like asynchronous technology to like set up and do testing. But what you could see is that there was at some point, and I wish I could say I knew AI and its entirety was coming, but at some point you could tell that the data itself would be more valuable and what you could build off of that data. But the reality is all that was just being dropped on the ground by these individuals. Or contained within these experts within inside these nodes of supply chain. So that was the inspiration of the business. And that's, we set out to build that connective tissue. And the first application we built on the top of it is visibility, which a lot of companies know us for.
So give me a backdrop. I mean, Project 44 sounds like some secret defensive project.
Oh.
I mean, what led you to, some unusual name?
Yes, at the time I was living in Chicago. I owned a consulting company and was consulting for a lot of folks, and we had a modest office, but it's like, what are you going to name a company? Everything is logistics this or logistics that, and really want to separate. And it's like 2 a.m. walking out the office, and I wasn't drinking that particular night, but I looked up and it was the end of historical Route 66 kind of ended right at our office. And so I kind of started Googling it, and I could see, Route 66 was replaced with Highway 44. That was called Project 44. And when I thought about it, we were replacing the old Route 66, the old EDI with API. And I said, why don't we just borrow that idea? Because when they opened up Highway 44 from LA to Chicago, that's what really allowed for containerized shipping to explode in this country and to open up so much. So I thought it was a clever name. There have been days that I thought it wasn't the best. 44 does not translate very well in China. And early days we had to overcome, apparently there's some pistol called a 44 that we had to overcome from an SEO. So wasn't always well thought out.
Great story, great backdrop. So let's talk about the visibility.
Yeah.
You and I had an earlier conversation. I roughly estimate about 40 plus or minus a couple of points friction in our supply chain.
Yeah.
I mean, today we talk about the carbon emissions, we talk about sustainability, we talked about digital transformations earlier. 40% friction. You think about the global supply chain across the world. It's $1 trillion worth of industry. That's a lot of waste.
Yeah.
How do you see from the Project 44 that your initiatives through visibility is improving that pipeline?
Yeah. I think so. It's a thoughtful question. I'd actually like to unpack these 40 points with you sometime, friction points, to better understand them. It'd be interesting to compare notes because we come from two different lenses, looking at the same problem. I suspect you've done a more robust research than we have on it. But the very first application is this transportation visibility. It's kind of this stepping stone to get in with customers. Most of these large shippers out there, whether it's a supplier, a retailer, a distributor, CPG, they want to know where their products are on a really tactical level. And knowing where they are, more importantly, they want to know when they're going to arrive. So that's kind of this first step. Now, we are the category creator of what Gartner calls real-time visibility. We're the Magic Quadrant leader and both access, but that alone is not why I put in the hours I do a week or the vision that we have set up or why we've raised so much capital. Inventory in motion is much more interesting. It's much more strategic. We've known where inventory at rest has been at since really what Manhattan came out in the 90s. And I think they've had a pretty good product. But inventory in motion, how can you reduce these friction points even more? How can you reduce stockouts? How can you overages, but also lower your expedited and lower your cost to hold your inventory? That's much more interesting. That's kind of the stage that most of the market's at now. When you talk about these friction points, it really ties in really nicely to the product. We're trying to create a new category right now, which is called high velocity. We'll check back in 2 or 3 years and see if we can actually pull it off or not. But this category, it mirrors what you're saying, what you find in your book and what you talk about here, which is that there are all these friction points. If you go pre-shipment into mode optimization, it's all done so anecdotally right now. On which carrier do you use? Do you use contracts, spot quotes? You don't have the emission scores in real time. You don't know the data quality the carrier is going to send. You don't know the real on-time performance in that particular situation with an event at the Red Sea, with the capacity at the port of Long Beach, with a Maersk ship that catches on fire. All that data, nobody knows when they're making decisions really right now, but kind of now they do with Project 44. And so I think you take out those friction points, at least that's how we think of the friction points. You combine that pre-shipment with shipment, which is visibility, and that post-shipment, which is getting into the yard and getting into the facility. And for us, that's a high velocity supply chain, removing all those friction points and getting to more value faster and lower cost.
So as you think about the high velocity, right? One of the things in the book, we talked about the hypothesis in which that there is no true sustainability that can be achieved without traceability and transparency, right? So the traceability, ensuring while you're trying to improve the velocity of data, how do we authenticate the data is legitimate and accurate?
Yeah.
Is that the challenge that you see and face?
Yes. So I've actually never like publicly ever discussed this on this like I will. Like the reality is that we're at a frontier on what we're doing. And we have candidly, we have really two cohorts of customers inside our customer base. We have these customers go, yeah, I could fire Project 44 or not. And we have this other cohort of customers that go, wow, I got a 400 or 500% return. And you're pulling on the right string there, because the ones that go, yeah, I could fire Project 44, which is bad for us. It's because of this carrier data quality. And so who's the responsible party to get this high quality data? I do a lot of double talking on this. When I'm in front of the customers, I say it's your responsibility. It might be shared ownership and we'll help. And when I go talk to my product team, I say, I want it to work 100% out of the box if the customer never does anything at all and if the carriers have really bad quality data. And so the way that we've been trying to solve this, and we have spent literally hundreds of millions of dollars on trying to solve just this one issue, is to have a transparent like data dashboard where you can see all the connectivity from all the carriers, 240,000 carriers on our network, which is the largest aggregation of electronic carrier communication in the world. So you have all these carriers come into a data dashboard where customers can see what's the latency, what's the milestones, what's the quality, and then we improve it with AI so that you have better inputs. And what that does is that unlocks much better outcomes and use cases. You go from this tactical, where's my truck or when's it going to arrive, to much more interesting use cases that can be unlocked.
So, I mean, that's a great approach and amazing work that you're doing, and aggregation of massive data sets, right? I mean, how much of that also gives you additional data points about their carbon footprints, the mode of transport, the fuel that they're using, the labor they're deploying in terms of the all of those other ESG related issues? Do you have the insight, or can your client, using your technology, draw some insight onto that?
Yes, one clarifying point. I don't do any of that fantastic work. All my team does. I'm quite honestly not smart enough. It's all the engineering and product team that does all that. But if we look at this scope, if you talk about labor, we have no value prop that I'm aware of, or even a use case where I've seen there. I guess we could see really where the source of the product is, but of course that could be manipulated or it doesn't give you much insights. When we talk about emissions measurement, I think we're really uniquely positioned for that. And we have a really robust emissions product that we co-developed with Amazon for over the road. And we have a really powerful ocean emissions. And the truckload, the over the road, it ties into the telematics. And so it looks at fuel consumption, actual route that's traveled. And there are some assumptions like what's the weight, but with fuel consumption, you can kind of get to it, and it'll say how much, what the emissions were.
Emissions, yeah.
The ocean one's more sophisticated. Ocean takes into account, we have a digital twin of about 55,000 vessels in the world, or the primary and secondary engine. It takes the actual route that the ship went, which does vary more so than people think. It takes ocean currents, it takes wind, and then there's an assumption, unfortunately, on the weight of the total vessel. And there's an assumption on what percentage that container is. So it's not perfect, but I think it is the best in the world. And of course, it has all the certifications. The bad news is, do you think it's higher or lower than what most companies estimate?
I would say it's much higher.
It's much higher.
Yeah.
It's usually about 13 to 26% higher than what companies are reporting or how it is that they're measuring.
Oh, wow. That's a big discrepancy.
Yeah, it is rather large.
Yeah. So what is the message for the companies then? Let's talk about, without really, I mean, so obviously to deploy the Project 44 solutions, but outside of that, what do you recommend?
Yeah, I think for me, this is a topic that about 35% of our revenue comes from Europe. And so this is something that I've been hearing constantly for years as I travel to Europe on a regular basis, is build these products. And it's so much more importance, whether it's by regulation or by just society there in Europe. The message is try to get a good baseline early on an accurate, good baseline, and then manage off of that. I always find it bizarre when companies try to shortcut, or they were looking for this lower number as we sit here in 2023 or 2024, or maybe even 25, because at some point there will be this day of reckoning of what the real emission score is. And there's going to be big spikes. I think there'll be a lot of shareholders disappointed, and employees and customers that feel like they've been misled. So my advice is always really simple: like, start with the higher number that's more accurate. Take your medicine now and manage off of that.
Very good. To your point, though, actually, there's about 370 plus regulations are in the pipeline globally. Right? Again, as I mentioned earlier, Europe is the leader in this space about the both coming up with the regulations and the enforcement and potential consequences.
So
We are up there second, but not on the enforcement side, and depends on the outcome of our elections. We'll see which side, how much of that implementation and enforcements will be impacted.
that's right.
But overall, I think there's a sentiment globally that I feel there is a common consensus, in spite of one's belief on global warming, that there's something needs to be done. So
Sure.
we're at the inflection point, I think, and then that shows all the regulations coming. How can the regulation, I mean, your solutions or even the digital transformation can become sort of an enhanced capability for regulatory compliance side that gives exact predicament of every unit and its carbon footprint?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey to go on, and like thing to discuss. We have 32 SKUs at Project 44. I'm curious, like, do you think the emissions is a high selling SKU for us or a low selling SKU?
I would be guessing, but I think I would say low.
It's the lowest selling SKU in the entire company. It's the best product for emissions measurement. You have all this regulation that's coming, or that already has come out, and it's the lowest selling. It's the biggest money loser of any product that we develop. But I do it because I'm passionate about it. And I think we can, to your point, we're really uniquely positioned to have an impact on this. But you know, that's disheartening. And of course, it's not, I guess a pun, it's not sustainable. Like, you can't continue to invest money in products that don't sell. So there needs to be some type of, it needs to be bottoms up and tops down, I think, for people to really hold companies accountable. This is action that needs to happen. And what are they doing? What are their measurements, and how are the measurements being calculated?
Are we doing enough as of now?
I think I mentioned I was in China last week, and it's interesting. I met with two primarily Western brands. Volvo, which is a customer and owned by the Chinese now, and then IKEA. And I was a bit surprised to see how passionate they were about sustainability. And I think that was kind of bleeding down from some of the Western cultures and things. But I was thrilled to see that there was passion in the young folks and even some middle-aged folks that were there locally, because a lot of the carbon that's emitted, it's going to be determined not by the Western world. We can certainly lead it. We can do technology advancements. But when you look at where this is being emitted from, and to be fair, a lot of it's from products that are being made for the Western world. But I think that we have to get some of these other countries and regions on board with some of these ideas, and we have to be able to show how they can still develop their economies, lift people out of poverty, and balance green and profit. Are we doing enough? I would say no, but it's a challenging thing to solve. When people are hungry in some regions, they're going to choose food over lower emissions. So how can we help? We took an investment from a company called Generation. Al Gore is part of it. He's the founder. I think we took $50 million of capital from them so that we could get our message out there. We could get our message out at the World Economic Forum and try to participate there. And so I think that's been, it's helped, but I'm encouraged, but no, we're not doing enough.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting perspective, I think, for the audience as well. I think there's a lot that needs to be done, right? A lot of things that we can do individually and collectively as an organization, as a community,
Yeah.
that may appear to be incremental at a time or maybe smaller drops in the bucket, but I think it's the bucket that needs to be filled, and every drop will count, actually, I think, in this initiative. So I'm certainly happy that you guys are in the forefront of this journey of visibility and that. So let's talk about specific customer value proposition when you talk about Project 44.
Okay.
What are the tangible things that if I am your customer, what am I gaining, or what is my insight?
Yeah. It depends on which one of the products they buy. There's certainly soft savings and hard savings. Maybe every software company always says there's more soft savings than hard savings, and that's the difficult part. But at the end of the day, we've got to really prove this ROI to our customers. Depending on the SKU, you will get different returns. And if we're here in Southern California, so one that comes to mind is just demergent detention. We have a very large footwear company that's a customer that most likely all of you own their shoes. And, they were in really, really healthy 7 figures, near 8-figure fees that were there for demergent detention. You can bring that almost down to zero by looking at terminal visibility, looking at when the last free day is. And that's a really easy product to sell on what is, how fast it's going to happen. If you look at another company like WestRock, which many of you probably haven't heard of, but you certainly use their products, corrugated boxes, these types of products. I think they're number 1 or number 2 in the world for these cardboard boxes. They had a 500% return on investment by using Project 44. And they didn't leverage Project 44 as a logistics or a supply chain platform. They leveraged it as a business platform. And it was probably one of the most advanced use cases I had ever seen of our technology being used. And if you look at the background of the chief supply chain officer, Peter, and Bill, the SVP, they came into it with just a totally different mindset, even of just like a supply chain person. They brought in finance, they brought in the commercial team, and they brought in operations supply chain. And they said, what are all the ways, tell me all the problems that you have in the business, all these friction points. And so they mapped it all out. And they had these individuals, Peter and Bill, had different, unique backgrounds because they were Ernst & Young supply chain digitalization leads there. And so when you get finance and you get operations and you get commercial in there, they were using our technology for their customer service department, for their sales team. What products should they be selling and putting on sale? Which one should they be discounting? A lot of companies will discount products, put it on sale, and they might not even have enough inventory in place. And then they have expediting product in. Well, of course, it's bad for emissions. It's certainly bad for profit, if there's any profit even left. So they ran it into all their material handlings. They put it into their procurement cycles. They put it in their demand planning software, into their ERP, of course, in their TMS, into all their BI tooling. So you could see someone like that has a soft and hard ROI and just makes a much better ran business. They've never shared their 500% ROI where they pulled it all out. We've talked about it. They've talked on stage about it, and I'll take them at their word that they were able to get it.
So am I understanding clearly that you got this legacy systems and then you sit on the top and create the hooks to extract the data and then provide the visibility?
Yes, and in many ways there are. We started as that one-to-many API layer for logistics, connecting 2 carriers to be able to do a rate quote API, a tender API, a tracking API, and a documents API, and bringing that all into one system. And so we connect the carriers to what initially we thought would be connect to the transportation management systems.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought we'll all just be a data as a service company. That's who we'll be. And if you look at the early fundraising pitches and how everything, I said, we never want an application or anything. But there were these problems, these things that you all talk about every day, which is the transportation management systems that are out there. A lot of them were built on-prem, and they were built with asynchronous technology like EDI, things we hadn't foreseen. So they couldn't even digest this real-time data that was flowing in. Some of the data, like truckload in Europe, we stream in kind of like Netflix. And so these systems weren't architecturally set up for that, and still to this day aren't, most of them. So we had to start building these applications on top where you could show these use cases that the power of this data. And you're right. Yes, we pull data in from ERPs. We also pulled in from TMS. But the real core is that I'm aware of, there are only 4 or 5 companies in the world that have more API connections than us, like AWS and GCP, which aren't typically companies you think of when you think of like, they're not SaaS products, of course.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's interesting. So Jeff, tell me, what keeps you awake at night? Besides the kids.
Yeah. I've got two kids that are amazing. Literally nothing, because I'm so exhausted from trying to keep this vision going, and of course the kids. I think it might be more like what wakes me up in the morning, and I think it's just this. There's just this huge opportunity. We're at the most. I've been in logistics since '99, like I mentioned. 2.5 decades. We're at this inflection point where all these technologies are coming together. You see these great talent. I met some amazing students that were here. They came over to the booth. Thank you for coming by. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Like, you see their eyes, you see how bright they are, and you look at their background, and you look at what they're going to be able to do with something like Project 44. Maybe they'll be the next CEO of Project 44. Because at the end of the day, I'm a logistics guy. I'm a trucking guy that became a 3PL guy that's trying to learn technology as fast as I can. I'm no match for this young talent that's coming out of, like, this guy that I just met. He's a supply chain, so he already knows more about supply chain than I do because he went to your school. Then he's got he's double major in data science, and he knows how to engineer. So this is the future, and I hope that this platform can just usher in this next level of talent. I hope they can take the baton and really drive it to where it needs to go, because I'm not the future, but hopefully I can just lay the path for them.
So, that to that point, 140 students started this week.
Wow.
On our cohort 10 for Masters of Science in Global Supply Chain Management, and many of them, they're here. So I want to just give a very big round of applause for them to jumping in with the both feet. And this is what I mean. They have not even taken one class yet. They just had their orientation and they're here. And truly, I think this is where the learning occurs, is listening to leaders like you, panelists, speakers, and gaining the insights and asking those questions in the classroom, being curious about what you don't know. And even what you know is it truly needs to be an unknown, and then find the new known. Right. So this journey of learning is such a dynamic journey. So I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. I think we are ending now, but for those students, so they have the same appetite in 1999 when you are answering the phone call about the 15 minutes ETA.
Yeah.
Many of these kids and the grown men and women have the same question. How do you go on this startup journey and persevere to be a successful entrepreneur? And what advice would you give? If there are top 3 things that you think that you would advise for somebody to remove the friction, like I like to call, out of the startup journey.
Well, if they want to go join a startup, I think that's an amazing way they can participate. If they want to go start a company, I think that's can be a different skill set, but equally as important. We need all these the talent to all chase after that. If you're going to be a founder, it should never be sugarcoated. Expect to give up your entire life in the next 20 years and have it be the highest priority. And health, relationships, anything at all that the average human being would value, it's almost impossible to have it be part of the priority. If you go join a startup business, it's a lesser degree of that, but still really impactful. And there's whether you want to measure impact by value to the world or monetary. And it will be the hardest thing that anyone ever did in their life. So that's I wish I could sugarcoat it or say anything, but it's there are reason guys like Steve Jobs and things die at such a young age. Like the amount of stress that it puts on them is serious. So If you're going to do it and prepare your life and set it up that you're going to have that level of dedication. And if it's not right for you, which is fine, I think, just go a different path and find a way to drive really strong impact that way.
Fantastic. I know we are out of time, but I would love to take one quick question from the audience. I'm sorry, we don't have running out. All right, right there.
Jeff, I like your young vibe, man. I'm an old guy.
Thanks. Thanks.
Is there any software out there that Google will build or anybody else has out there that actually monitors manufacturing production? Because what I come across all the time is that my clients are constantly planning in China, wherever it is, using it's delayed. They can't keep up with when it's going to be next dates, things like that. Is there any, the supply chain starts when the product is still ready to ship, right?
That's right.
Is there any monitoring software that monitors the actual manufacturer and keeps them in the loop, puts them on the hook for meeting the X factor dates of production?
I'm not aware of a company that does manufacturing, especially inland China. Of course, exporting data out of China has very high friction point. We took $125 million of capital from Goldman Sachs, and a significant amount of that came from the CIC. So we have a special arrangement with Lingam government in the Shanghai port where we can export data, transportation data anywhere in the world. And so that's the earliest signal that I'm aware of that any company in the world is able to really have at scale, reliable data. And that's, if you think about it in the supply chain, that can give you 25, depending where you are in the world, to 45 days of notice. But yeah, monitoring manufacturing, China, maybe the Chinese government has that data.
Right?
Yeah.
But still, I mean, it's fine if you have a 60 to 90 day window of production. Right?
Yeah.
So if they have visibility of that, that would kind of coincide with managing the whole supply chain to the door. You know what I mean? But you'd be a genius if you cover that. It's not only with China, but Europe. So that might be your next venture.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
but I think just to emphasize your point, it's not even at the point of manufacturing. It's acquisition of raw material.
That's right.
So it goes all the way to the farm in case of agriculture, in mining, in terms of the raw material, and entire traceability domain that's opening up is actually very fascinating. But great question. Jett, thank you so very much. Let's go a very big round of
Appreciate it.
applause. Thank you again.
Appreciate the questions.
Jett, we didn't think this through. We should have had some walk-off music. Jett, ooh, 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 Jett, ooh.